المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بالمهتدين صدق الله العلي العظيم. My dearest, my most respected, my honorable elders, beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, we begin by taking this opportunity as per usual to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to glorify and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for enabling us once again with this unique and wonderful opportunity to come together for the sole purposes of worshipping Him, glorifying Him, praising Him, and ultimately to send salutations upon His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we pray that Allah Azza wa Jal will continue to facilitate these kinds of opportunities for us in the future, inshaAllah. You might have, some of you have seen the topic of today's talk, titled Social Media, the good, the bad, and the very ugly. I added the very myself. There used to be a time when we as human beings, we would interact with one another. And our interaction with one another would actually be communicated via the most appropriate means and in the best possible way. We would speak to one another, we would talk to each other, our lips would actually move, and some noise would actually come out of them, sound would actually come out. There was a time when people would actually sit down and assess their thoughts. They would write letters to each other, take extreme amount of time in order to convey their feelings to paper, from pen to paper, and then take that letter and then send it out to that person, and the person who would be reading it would feel a sense of joy and satisfaction at receiving this letter, this communication from someone. It made people feel loved, it made people feel wanted, it made people feel better. There was a time when and I remember this, and I'm not that old. Neither are you. But you would remember this, some of the younger brothers might not. There was once a time when the TV would have 4 channels, right? And then I remember the channel 5 came along, right? And that was it. We had 5 channels in the television. There was, there was a time when all of our flight information and all of the news, and for those of you who during the end of the season, the football season, are looking at the transfer gossip of which players my team has signed, and all of those transfer rumors, we would go onto that TV, and with that remote, there was a very limited medium, which at the time didn't seem limited, right? And it was our go-to medium for all of that information. It was called the teletext. I can see some people nodding in acknowledgement. Teletext. And this was our source of information. There was a time when people communicated before mobile phones were invented. And I remember that time. I remember a time when I was a child, and me and my siblings, we were in a room with our parents and family members, and there was a huge cassette player. Sometimes you have this massive hi-fi system, right? There was this cassette player there, and I remember my father putting a cassette inside that cassette player and then pressing record and then talking into this cassette player and saying, Assalamu alaikum, how are you, how's this person, how's that person, and they would say, listen, come over here, say Assalamu alaikum to your daddy, say Assalamu alaikum to your grandmother, your grandfather, your uncle, and this person, that person. We're talking to a cassette player But that's what we would do. And then we would say, Assalamu alaikum, yeah, I'm okay, I'm going to school, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then everybody would say their bit, and then that cassette player would be taken out and it would be given to someone who was traveling to Kashmir, to Pakistan, to wherever else that you were from. And then it would be given to them. And when they would receive the cassette player, they would put it in and the whole family would gather, they would listen, and they would respond, and they would talk. This is how we communicated. It wasn't much simpler time, without all the complexities of what we have. Now it was a time filled with love and appreciation. Our relationships, though less communication than we have now, less modes and methods of communication, there was far more love and appreciation. A time when people actually cared about each other, would relish the opportunity to get together and meet. You know, remember the time when guests would come to your house. And I remember the time when guests would come to our home, and everybody would rush to the door to greet the guests. Assalamu alaikum, do come on in. And everybody would gather to meet that person. And then your parents would be there, your mother would say, oh, we've got this, and get this thing out. Get that out for them to eat. And no, stay with us. You don't need to go home. Stay with us tonight. And we convince them to try and stay. Because we enjoy their company that much. Now, somebody knocks on the door, we look at each other. Who's that? Who could that person be? Do you know who it is? And then when you open the door and it's an unexpected visit from, it could be a family member or a friend, someone close to you. And then you rush into me. Why didn't you call us beforehand? Why didn't you let us know you were coming so we could be prepared? You know that level, that love that you have, that desire to want to communicate, to share your experiences, your feelings, your emotions with one another. Unfortunately, over time that has dissipated. We live in the time of social media. Social media, to an extent, has become this virtual deity, which is omnipresent, omniscient in our lives. We cannot live without it. We cannot. Let me prove it to you. Put your phone away. One day, 24 hours, phone free, social media free, internet free, and see how it impacts your life. If you don't think that social media weighs heavily and has a massive impact on the way we think, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we act, then put it away for 24 hours and see the effect of that. Some of us won't last 24 hours. That's the honest truth that we won't be able to. It's a facilitator. It's become, at times, an educator, mostly an entertainer. Sometimes even a spiritual trainer for us. We go and, there was a time, in Islam we have this rich oral tradition. Right? And what I mean by that is that our tradition, it goes back and it's transmitted to us orally over time. As in, the Prophet ﷺ, he did not write down the Quran, it was not written in a book and it was given to him and then he conveyed that book to the masses. No. Sayyidina Jibreel, when he came with the wahi to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ then conveyed that revelation by way of speaking to the companions, by way of mouth. Assalamu alaikum. Prophet ﷺ did that. The companions then did the same. Some of them wrote verses of the Quran down. Some of them wrote verses of the Quran down. Others, perhaps memorized those verses. That's how they would communicate with one another. That's how they would transmit that knowledge. That transmission was so important. And knowing where you've taken that information from, that was important. Like Abdullah ibn Mubarak, there's a subject of hadith. That was my field when I was studying in Azhar. And in the subject of hadith, there's something called ilm al-jarh wa ta'deel, which is the subject of authenticating narrators or rejecting narrators based upon their previous testimony, based upon the way they live their life. So you scrutinize. You have is the knowledge of scrutinizing those narrators to see whether they lie or they have lied, or is there a reason why they would lie? Because it's so important that the subject is such an important subject matter that we have to take extreme caution who we accept narrations of the Prophet ﷺ from. Now, in that the subject matter, you are allowed to scrutinize those narrators. You have the permission to do so. Abdullah ibn Mubarak talks about this chain, this sanad. You know, every hadith is made up of two things. It's a matan and it's a sanad. The actual text of the hadith, which you say the Prophet ﷺ said, and in the statement. The statement is the matan, is the text, the crux of the narration. However, more important than the matan is the actual sanad. The chain of transmission is more important. Who said it? Who did they transmit it from? Because we need to verify the authenticity of that statement. That's how important it is. So and so narrated from so and so narrated from so and so. So we know, oh well, he narrated from him, who narrated from him, who narrated from him, who said this, and then the Prophet ﷺ made this statement. Okay? So you know who the chain of narration is, you know who you're getting your information from. You know the source of your information. Abdullah ibn Mubarak said, لولا الإسناد لقال من شاء ما شاء. If it wasn't for the chain of narration, then anybody would say whatever they wanted to say. As in there would be no sense of, there's no reproach on that. There's no repercussions for getting things wrong. Anybody can say whatever they want to say. There's nothing to do about it. It's incredibly important you know where you're getting your information from. Nowadays, online, when we need any information about our religion, when we need any information with regards to our religion, what do we conduct? Oh, forget our religion, just anything in life. Google it. Google it. You want to know about that? Google it. Now we have complex questions, religious questions. We consult the internet. Google the question. You get 124,000 variations of the same answer. You understand? And you don't know the source of that information. You just accept it. Oh, it was someone who put it up there. It must be right. It's on the internet. No, you need to know where your source, where the information of your source. The youth now have grown from couch potatoes, possibly during my time, to web addicts. Now, social media, the social media revolution has sort of morphed the way our youth, our young generation think, the way they behave, and it's hard to imagine how quickly social media has gone such a major transformation in such a short space of time, changing the way we communicate with one another. There's constant innovation taking place, and the challenges that our young people, our youth, and subsequently the next generations have to face are ones that we have to take very seriously. There are problems, and for those problems we need to find tenable solutions. Whether we like it or not, this cyber migration is here to stay, and it has a profound impact upon the lives of our young people. It is raining social media sites. It's raining apps with people finding this virtual platform to connect, to socialize, to share their thoughts and feelings. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we couldn't imagine that we would be able to communicate with a person on the other side of the world. Not just communicate via phone, just to actually see them. To see them crystal clear, in the best imagery possible, right? With the most pixels imaginable. We'll be able to see them, we'll be able to communicate in real time. We didn't imagine that would ever happen 30 years ago, but it has. And it's going to continue to evolve, whether we like it or not. It's it's here to stay. The power of this tool, the social networking, is such that the number of worldwide users is currently around 3 billion people. And even then, I think that's conservative. I think almost everybody now, in some way, shape, or form, is either using or is impacted by social media, which is expected to reach, 5 billion in the mid 2020s, and that's around a third to moving on to a half of the world's population. It's an extremely powerful tool if utilized appropriately and in the best possible way. We saw revolutions spark through social media. I was in Egypt in 2011 when Arab Spring happened, and it was through Facebook and social media posts. And this is in 2011 when even now we look back at social media in 2011 and we think that was ancient, right, compared to what we have now. And it sparked a revolution such as the power of social media. The youth have this kind of potential to trigger mass revolution, to change the world, and it's imperative that we inspire them to do so for the better. And that's why it's important to talk about some of the good aspects of it. Right? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying everything is all bad and we should go back and send ourselves back into the dark ages. No, we're people of revolution, we're people of technology, we're people of progression. As Muslims, throughout human history, look at our tradition, look at our history. I've spoken about this many times before, our contributions to the world. Some of in fact, social media wouldn't exist today had it not been for the advancements that Muslims made in the fields of mathematics and science, 300, 400, 500 years ago. So there are many benefits that can be taken from this platform. There's much good that can be utilized from it if done so appropriately. The power it has is amazing, being able to communicate millions, billions of people across the world. But unfortunately, I feel like we're not utilizing that in the appropriate way. Whereas 30 years ago, we would have loved to be able to communicate with someone across the other side of the world because we had this desire to do that. We had this compassion, this care for one another. Now we take it for granted. We take this power for granted. How often do we communicate with each other? How often do we call our parents, our siblings, our loved ones, speak to them, talk to them? Now sometimes I know I've been in that situation where you just pick up the phone, you have no idea what to say. I've been in gatherings where people are sitting down, where you get this opportunity after a long time to sit down and converse with one another, share stories, and everyone is sitting there on their phones. In fact, I'm sure you've been there too, that when people are actually sitting in the same room and communicating via the phone, texting one another, things get lost in translation. Things get lost in that mode or method of communication. We have the accessibility of knowledge. I remember talking to my teacher and people talking about al-rihla fi talab al-ilm, traveling in search of knowledge. This is a sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about those individuals. Man kharaja fi talab al-ilm kana fi sabilillah hatta yarja'a. He who goes out in search of knowledge, he's in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until he returns. Being in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means that this individual is under the protection of Allah and the malaika and of the angels. Angels, place their wings underneath that individual's feet. The talib al-ilm, the seeker of knowledge. People will travel many miles, distances to seek knowledge. You've heard that story of Imam Bukhari, haven't you? Right? He went to collect a narration from someone in a far distant land. It took many, many months' journey to get there. He heard that this individual has a particular narration, a particular hadith that others don't have and that he hasn't heard of before. And he's part of that chain of transmission. And he goes there. He travels to that land. to find this individual for that one narration, one hadith. And when he gets there, he heard the story, he sees a man who has a bucket, and the bucket is actually empty, but he's enticing the horse to come closer to him, making the horse think that there's something inside the bucket. And like we would say to a child sometimes, or even to a pet that we have, here, come here, I'll give you something. Right? And he saw this, and then he found out that this is the man who has the hadith, the narration. And immediately, without even asking the person, without even talking to that individual, he leaves and he goes back to his own land. And people ask him, why didn't you take the hadith? You went, many months journey to find this one particular narration. And he said, look, if this individual can deceive or attempt to deceive a creation of Allah, then he could deceive me as well. This was the level of scrutiny that those individuals had, where they got their knowledge from. That was so important. So we, 30 years ago, we would love to have the accessibility of knowledge that we have now, knowledge at our fingertips. It's as if we have so much more accessibility to knowledge now, but yet it seems as if we are more uneducated now than we were back then. We're going backwards, aren't we? So we need to utilize these platforms in the most appropriate way. And this is incredibly important. I remember my teacher, and this is not going back too far, right? I started studying in 2006-7. And one of our teachers said to us, the wealth of a student is in his books. And my subject matter, as I told you, my professor was in hadith. And in the matter of the subject of hadith, we would have the fair, some by the brothers know the book fair. And we would go to the book fair and we would buy as many books as we can. And over time, we would try to take them back in our luggage whenever we would come back slowly to try and bring back with them. Because we were taught by our teachers that this is our wealth. The books that we have are our wealth. And I remember buying, at the time, volumes and volumes of books of hadith. And by books of hadith, I mean not usul al-hadith or ilm al-hadith. We're talking about the actual hadith texts, like Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunan Abu Dawud, Sunan Ibn Majah, Tirmidhi, and the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, the Muwatta of Imam Malik, and many other collections. Now, I know what I went through the struggle to buy all of those books and to get them here into this country. I can tell you over, in terms of books, over 100 to 150 maybe of those collections. And when I got back, I was at a meeting with someone, I think this was in like 2008 or 9, and there was a brother of ours, and he said, oh, have you seen this? And I forgot what they call it. He said, oh, do you have the collections of all the hadith books? And I said, no. Well, yes, I've got them, and I bought most of them over. And he said, well, I've got this CD, and he gave me a CD, and on that CD was every single book that I had purchased. It was there. Every single book, the accessibility of it. And that was, we're talking about almost 15 years ago. Things have evolved since then. We've got everything available. You can go to online, you've got every single, you can type in a word from a hadith and it will be found online. So this is an incredible tool if we utilize it appropriately, if we do so in the best possible way. But there are many bad aspects to it. I know I've come to the end of my time, but I have to talk about some of them. For children, for young people, it's important for parents to understand online grooming is a thing. It happens. It's a massive problem. That's both sexual grooming, extremist grooming as well. You heard the story of that girl, Shamima Begum, who that she was groomed online. Sexual predatory is taking place online. People are using these platforms to wreak havoc on the lives of others. Online gaming, online gambling. Gambling is a major issue. Whereas people, when they wanted to gamble in the past, they would have to get money, physical wealth, go to the casinos and gamble. Now it's, they've got everything available at their fingertips. They can do that online, waste all of their money. And these gaming and gambling have very real social and psychological repercussions as well. That disconnect from reality, the neglect of personal relationships, when we're already, our personal relationships are feeling neglected, social relationships, gaming and gambling taking precedence over everything else, becoming the most important thing in that child or that young adult's life. It's imperative that we seek to control that, curtail that in the best possible way, and increase in inactivity, right? Resulting in obesity. The biggest problem facing children in the UK today, health problem, is obesity in schools. That's the biggest problem for the NHS for children. That's on the rise. The sexualization of society, pornography, I've spoken about that in the past. The most viewed, the countries that view pornography the most are actually Muslim majority countries. And this is a problem. This is something that we need to talk about. This is what tenable solutions need to be found. Why is that the case? More and more younger children are being exposed to those explicit material. The spread of immodesty, we're in the summer now. Pictures, the lack of decency that we have sometimes. Right? How we're exposing ourselves, our bodies on camera to the world. That needs to be curtailed. A sense of modesty needs to be instilled in our children from a young age in order for them to understand. Make them understand. Don't just tell them what you have to do. You have to do this. Why? It doesn't matter. Just do it. No. Teach them about the beauty of modesty. The dumbing down of our children and children feeling bad about themselves, this poor body image, this abuse vitriol that often takes place online, which leads children to having, resulting in severe psychological, mental problems for them from a young age. That needs to be curtailed. The chasing likes to drive our self-esteem. How many people did I get who saw my TikTok video? How many likes did I get on that Facebook page? Constantly striving for that. Instilling in them self-worth so that they don't, seek that in those things. And this is for elders too, not just for children. It's affecting our psyche, and it's imperative that we find those tenable solutions. Talk to children from a young age. Have time within your family. You can't get rid of social media, but have time within your family when there's no social media, no phones, no pads, no tablets, nothing. Where you actually communicate with each other, talk to each other, and let's bring that mode and method of communication back into our lives. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me and you with those the ability to act upon the teachings of the Quran and the noble sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.